Well, good morning, everyone. I am pleased to be here today to be able to talk about, I think, one of the more critical topics that we all, those of us in the industry, have to be thinking about. Those of us that are in policy setting roles need to be thinking about, because as I like to think about the future, the gigabit age is already here, and we're now moving beyond that in terms of where I think the industry's going. You know, the way I like to think about it is often we view concepts such as this notion of a gigabit future as, highly futuristic. And I would say in this case it is not, because it is here, it is now, and it's coming at us in a very rapid and maybe in some ways what we would call a chaotic kind of fashion. It's driven by the growing demands of Australians that are using every day of their lives now broadband in their homes, in their businesses, and now on mobile devices wherever they go, wherever they work, or wherever they play. Consumption of bits and bytes is increasing basically at log linear rates. The current consumption patterns are essentially driven by a limited group of high bandwidth consumers, but it's extending now to more and more Australians literally as we go every day through this year, next year, and beyond. We're at a point now where we really need to understand what infrastructure investments, what priorities, products, services will best enable that gigabit future. Well, I'm here today to say FTTN is very important. I think I'm the person that started the nationwide dialogue and debate about it 3 years ago. But it's not the only dimension to the gigabit future. It may not even be the most critical element in and of itself, because there are other pieces to what I would call the ecosystem that has to be put in place. The important thing that goes with it is the notion that says we now have to make some bets. As a nation, as companies, as players in the ecosystem, we all have to be making some bets. And a mere 15 months later, in November of last year, the traffic had grown to almost 18,000 terabytes for a single month. That's a 90-fold increase in less than 7 years, and the pace of that growth isn't slowing. Actually, it's still accelerating as we have deployed a next IP network, a next G network, and as more and more consumers are signing on into this, what I would call this high bandwidth, real-time future. The traffic is not created in isolation. It's part of an end-to-end ecosystem. The weakest link in this end-to-end chain can be the Achilles heel that destroys a user experience. Consider, for example, the server farms that host the applications. Those of you that are in that side of the business, you probably know here in Australia, we're basically out of data center space almost everywhere. We have contention almost everywhere. Why? Because there's more and more applications, more and more needs, and with that comes, the needs for the servers. Well, servers require space. And with that space and hosting and all that comes energy and power, and the ability to serve it with power and real estate and everything else is all part of this ecosystem, but it's not the whole part either. And this is becoming a bigger and bigger challenge for all of us as we think about the whole ecosystem. Now, the old world problem, as we think about things like physical elements of real estate and power and things like that, is helping us now have to think about breaking paradigms. So as I think about paradigm shifts, I think about things like grid computing or virtualization as concepts that are being developed, and the need for investing in some of these new technologies or enablements that will enable the rest of our networks, as we classically talk about them, to work properly. It's important to stop here And think about what that means, you know, in the classic industry context. Because whether you've been talking about Moore's Law, Kreider's Law, or Nielsen's Law, innovation is the key for simultaneous users in a digital ecosystem. Because simultaneous use has created new paradigms than what I would call in the old voice world as we think about customer experience. Australia's Gigabit Future needs an end-to-end ecosystem that's scalable, integrated, flexible, device agnostic, secure, widely available, and let's never forget the word fast. When I say fast, I don't mean 1 megabits per second or 3 or even 12 megabits per second. Australia's Gigabit Future is going to need 30, 50, 100 megabits per second in a relatively short period of time.